Hey, Randy, episode 7. We made it another week.
I mean to tell you, maybe we'll get better and better at this as it goes along too. You never know.
Some people have said that they like the most recent episodes the best. So,
Good.
regardless, I'm having fun. I think you're having fun. So, I
Absolutely.
think we're checking our boxes for the original intent. So,
Right.
I was talking to somebody else the other day that she was talking about wanting to do a podcast with her brother about family things, and but she said as I've listened to some of yours, it's a lot about what you're doing and just what you guys do and sit down and have civil discussions. And I think without exception, whether people like our stance on college football or politics or the war in Iran, I think people agree that there needs to be more civil discourse and respectful discussion. So I think we're accomplishing our objectives. So whether anybody else thinks so or not, I really don't care.
Yeah. That's right.
This is not my retirement plan, so that's good.
Okay. Good.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep my day job, I think, for a while, but I love to it, enjoy it. I look forward to recording this and going through it. You mentioned and one thing I've tried to I think it makes me better at being a listener, which I think translates to family. I try to intentionally not talk and listen, and then wait my turn, which I'm told in my family I don't do that well. I try to do that at work more. I think it's doing some things. It's also making me a little smarter. Listening to you makes me smarter, but doing some research to get ready for each of these makes me dive into some topics. So I look forward to what's the next thing we discuss for a week or two because I'm getting smarter. So
Yeah. Right.
never too old to keep learning, right?
That's right.
So episode 7, we teased it last week as to what we're going to do. It's kind of the next big topic of college football and college sports. Football dominates these discussions, and we intend to talk about college athletics when we talk about these. But a lot of times, football becomes the kind of the center stage, and that's because it really is the biggest revenue generator. It's kind of the main thing, and it's kind of the gravitational pull that affects every other object. So the decisions that are made around college football, and I actually saw Trump today in the middle of again trying to solve problems in the Middle East and all that. Was talking about college sports. He had a few national champion teams, a number of Olympic sports. Ironically, visiting the White House today, and was talking about the decisions that are made could really affect what our Olympics look like going forward,
Mhm.
and some of that. So I thought it was intriguing the timing of us talking about this because I do agree. And we talked last week about whether we break football apart from the other ones and the funding and none of this stuff's easy. I've got a lot of questions this week. I know you probably will. I've got some ideas, but the more I dig into it, the more I realize, especially with a bunch of people with very self-focused interest on their thing, whether it's their school, whether it's their conference. I think this gets really hard to solve, especially when you don't have a true commissioner of college football and there's no governing body. The more I dig into this, the less hopeful I am that it doesn't tend more toward chaos. So that said, let's jump in. So episode 7, sharing the wealth, equitable funding of college sports. So that's a broad topic with a lot in there. Um, and really, I've just got one question to kind of kick it off, and I'm going to turn it over to you. It's kind of a statement question. So I think what's interesting, and I mentioned it a little bit last week too, the last couple of weeks, we're living in a world where I believe the biggest problem is we're stuck between what was, what is, and what's to come,
Mhm.
and it's a mix of all three of those, and it's a weird mix. And I think anytime you get a system, an organization stuck um, too far in the past, and kind of stuck where you are and not really sure where you're going, it gets clunky. And I think that's
Yeah.
where specifically college sports and college athletics is. And I think the real crux of it is the professional money is there. We're denying that the athletes are professionals. There is no professional structure. There's no legitimate contracts. There's no collective bargaining agreement. The main talent, they're not even employees. Um, and so all that said, what's the answer? And I think a lot of what we're going to talk about tonight around the revenue sharing, what the structure of that is. Honestly, this part you really can't get to until you solve some of the other problems. The NIL and some of
Right.
that is wrapped up in this, but really until you solve some of the fundamental pieces of structure of what are the conferences, um, are the people who are the main talent of the whole thing and the driver of it, are they employees? And what are contracts? I think until you
Mhm.
really do some of that, this all gets really wonky, and what you end up with is more loopholes where you can have more
Uh-huh.
people giving more money, and it's going to slant toward the money is the power, and it's going to be where the concentration of talent and wins come. So, I think we would have to solve our last couple of weeks, but I'm looking forward to some theories on what we could do. And again, unfortunately, the more I study, the less likely of a good outcome I feel like we're going to achieve. So, over to you.
Well, you certainly, I think, hit on the big concern. The reality is money drives all of these decisions, good or bad. It is a business. It is a big business. It is a growing business without a lot of guardrails and a lot of rationale in terms of how to control or how to make the best utilization of the money that's being generated. My fear for a few years now has been that if we don't come up with some sort of systematic manner to handle the financial side of this, we're going to end up with a half dozen major programs that have access to big dollars from big donors uh, who can who can give $1 billion and really not miss it. Um, and we're going to end up with a growing chasm between the haves and the have-nots, and there're going to be a very small number of haves and a large number of have-nots. And at the end of the day, what does that do to the quality of the product? What does that do to the fan base? And ultimately, do we kill the sports? So
Yeah.
I took some time this week to just give some thought to the sources. First of all, where's the revenue coming from? Um, the biggest is the TV revenue, the
Mhm.
television contracts, primarily for football, but also men's basketball. And then you've got other contracts that are for the Olympic sports, the minor sports, that sort of thing, where they occasionally will show up on ESPN2 or ESPNU or whatever. You've got NIL, and we know we've already discussed what a mess that is. What it is supposed to be is compensation to individual athletes for the use of their name, image, and likeness. Unfortunately, the collectives came in and absconded with that, with most of those resources. Um, the collectives still have a place, and I'll explain that in just a second. That is certainly a source of revenue. And then you've got ticket sales to the events. Um, right now, those are the primary sources of revenue anyway. We're not sending, at least as far as I know, any government money to these institutions, although with the state colleges, you might get some private colleges out there that would disagree with that statement. But for the
Yeah.
most part, we're talking about TV revenue, NIL, money gathered by the collectives in whatever manner, and ticket sales.
Yeah, the
I don't have
other
a prop
I had
Go
the
ahead.
same thing. My first thing was primary revenue streams. And I do TV contracts are obviously the biggest one. And then
Mhm.
the biggest of those, the billions of dollars from ESPN, Fox, CBS, NBC, is for the SEC and the Big Ten.
Right, right.
And so you've already got a slant of power there. Ticket sales, obviously. March Madness is another big one. Just the tournament itself, and because football and men's basketball is generating all the revenue that floats everything.
Mhm.
But the primary driver of revenue for basketball really comes from the tournament.
Right, right.
The donors and boosters, which gets a little tied up into the collective, but some of them are not part of the collective. They just donate to facilities and other pieces. The other big one, and I think this is an interesting thing, and when I get down to solutions later, it can be one of the differentiators because I don't believe in socialism, so I don't think everybody should have exactly the same dollar. I believe in some capitalism, and I think where there's some room for some of that is merchandise sales
Mhm.
because you do get with some of the national brands,
Sure.
and you do, and merchandise sales can move the needle. I do think
Mhm.
that's where some of the things, even when you
No,
start
I
trying to
agree.
flatten
Yeah.
it, can help. But yeah, I think it's funny. I started out, like, my very first thing was, okay, let's identify the revenue stream. So
Mhm.
fully agree with that. And the
Yeah.
TV is the elephant, though, that dominates it all.
Sure.
And I think you
Well,
can
one of the
see
things.
too the ESPN and SEC deals and CBS for years. The money tracks with the wins. We talked about
Right,
this, the last
right.
week or two. The SEC was dominating with their TV contracts. The Big Ten stepped up and got more, and then you can watch how wins have followed that. So you can't
Right,
separate money and wins, but it's pretty easy to follow.
right. Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that because the next thing I had on my list here is TV revenue itself, and this shocked me a little bit. Maybe it won't you, but in 2025, television revenue alone. Now, this is across all sports. Okay, exceeded $12.5 billion just in television contracts.
Yep.
Now, let's stop and just do some simple math. I'm not saying this is the solution, but we need to put some context around this thing. There are 360 Division One schools that play a variety of sports, a total of 24 Division One sports recognized by the NC2A. If you took that 12.5 billion, almost 13 billion, and you divided that by 360 schools, that would be 33 and a third billion dollars per school. Now, I'm not saying it should all be given in that manner, distributed, but I'm saying that gives you a little bit of context as to the amount of
You
money that is
hang on.
out
You
there.
said billion. You mean million,
Billion,
right?
huh? Oh, I'm sorry,
If you,
33 and a third million
yeah,
per
yeah, yeah.
school
Yep.
based on that 12 billion. Okay. And then that's now we're not talking NIL. We're
Right.
not talking collectives money. We're not talking about ticket sales and merchandise. So that's strictly TV revenue. So, in looking at that amount of money, uh, I went back and said, okay, we know that there are these other sources as well. So, how could you, first of all, sort of divide this up in a manner that would benefit everyone from Ohio State University to Washita State University in Arkansas? And so I came up with just some suggestions, and I may be completely off base here, and I'm not sure that any of this is even possible. And I'm not going to get into the legality. I don't want to get into
Yeah.
speculation of whether they're employees or not employees, whether they should have collective bargaining rights. I'm just talking about distribution of the revenue. In my perfect world, the TV revenue, just the television revenue from contracts, would be used only for funding player payments, not for anything else. Okay, that would be the source of the play for pay contracts, the basically the NFL type of model that comes from primarily TV contracts. Now, the NIL, as we have stated before, you and I've talked about this, are individual contracts between athletes and corporations or businesses that want to pay them for their name, image, and likeness. The school should have nothing to say about that. Okay. But it should be these individual contracts that are entered into between the athlete and whoever it is that's wanting that access to their NIL. The collectives still have a value, but now they go back to being what they used to be, which is basically a big booster club. You can use those funds, number one, for coaches' salaries and staff salaries. Okay. Stadium expansion, new venues, these places where somebody wants to give 250 million to the school to revamp their stadium, whatever. That would be the purpose of the collectives. Don't touch the TV revenue. And there's a reason for that because I've got an idea of how to handle that TV revenue. Then you've got ticket sales. And I'm glad you mentioned merch sales because I completely forgot about that. And that can be a tremendous source of revenue for these schools. That should be used to fund administrative overhead, do the marketing for the different sports for the schools, your operational expenses, et cetera. everything that it takes to keep, the Rose Bowl open and operational, that sort of thing. So you've got a purpose for these different sources, and I would prefer that they not be commingled, at least as much as we could separate those. Um, and so, in looking at this, now it gets a little bit complicated because you say, okay, let's say this does come out to 33 and a third million per year per school. Number one, not every school is going to need that. Not every school funds football, which takes a lion's share of that particular pot. And but there's still a way to deal with that. Let's assume you still set aside $33 million per school for all 360 schools. Okay. My recommendation is now we go to salary caps, just like the NFL. So for your football program, I don't care if you are Ohio State or Washita State, if you're Division One, and I'm leaving Divisions 2 and 3 completely out of this, and NAIA and that sort of thing. They kind of do their own thing. I taught at an NAI school, and there was no such thing as an athletic scholarship. There were
Right.
athletes that got academic scholarships. That's
Yep.
a whole different animal. So we're not talking about doing that. But um, we take that 33 million and we have a salary cap, just like the NFL for football. We have a salary cap for men's basketball, women's basketball, all the way down to field hockey for the women or whatever, or the bowling team, whatever the university chooses to fund. If Oklahoma wants to fund to a bowling team, that is their business, and there would be a cap there. If Texas Tech wants to have a bowling team that is nothing but a club sport and they choose not to fund it, that's up to the university.
Let me
Okay.
let me
But
ask you this real quick, just for
okay.
clarification. So, and I think we might get to a disagreement on this. I'm excited about this.
Okay.
Um, okay, 33 million a school. What if so everybody gets 33 whether they have football or not?
Well, yeah,
Because are you gonna base it on are you gonna weight it based on
I'm gonna get you down to that because
okay,
yes, that's a good question. Creighton
okay,
University does not have football or baseball.
right,
So, but they still going to get to keep that money? No. What you would
okay,
do is you'd have what I call a player pay cap or a salary cap, and let's say that for football that's 17 million. Now there's got to be a ruling body that determines this. It's got to be equal across the board. The Dallas Cowboys don't get one cap, and the Pittsburgh
right,
Steelers another cap. It's established by the NFL. So let's say it's 15 million. Okay, for football. Every university that fields a football team can utilize up to $15 million, and that's it.
got it.
However, they choose to do it. If they want to give all that to a quarterback and everybody else just plays for scholarship, that's the school's business. Okay. Just like it is in the NFL. Um, you have another amount that is set aside for men's basketball, another for baseball, a women's softball, et cetera. And this can be done. This is not rocket science by any stretch. Now, if let's say I am Creighton University, I don't have a football team. That 17 or that 15 million, I do not have access to. I don't get to use it in other sports. I don't get to pocket it. It goes back to the NFL. It is unused revenue. But at the same time,
Where does that go?
it, it, that's where it's going to have to go back to the governing body, whatever it happens to be.
But what would they do with
Okay.
it? Because they're a nonprofit.
Um,
Because they're gonna have to do something with it. They can't just put it in savings.
I
They have to
have no
spend it
doubt.
every year.
I have no doubt that there is a manner in which they can utilize that. I mean, I realize we never run into that in the NFL because
Right.
everybody spends to the top of their cap.
That's right.
But that would be something that would have to be dealt with in terms of, does that then go into some sort of a trust for other purposes utilized to benefit the athletes? It's got to benefit the athletes. It cannot
Yeah.
benefit the conferences.
Yeah.
It
No,
cannot benefit the schools.
Yeah.
It has to be in my model, it has to be to benefit the athletes. Um, let's say that, for example, Oklahoma has a very good national championship gymnastics program,
Mhm.
and they have some NIL kids in there. It's not a
Yeah.
great deal of money, but there would be a salary cap there that they could utilize.
Yeah.
Texas Tech does not have gymnastics.
Right.
They don't get access to those funds. You only get access to the funds of the sports that you are fielding and that you need NIL. You don't have to. I don't have to spend all the money if I'm an NFL owner. I don't have to spend up to my cap if I choose not to.
Yeah, I think you
It's
gotta
it.
I do think you gotta do a floor, and that's been an issue in baseball and other sports when you got the luxury tax, it goes to, I don't know, pick a team, the Pittsburgh Pirates or whoever,
Mhm.
they're getting luxury tax money from other teams, and they choose to invest it in whatever besides their team. So then you gotta put a floor with that too. You can't just have a ceiling and a cap, but you gotta have a floor, else people will take it and invest it in things other than players.
No, that's true. But if you take that away from the individual colleges, and they don't get that money. Whatever they don't spend, they
Yeah,
lose.
no,
And it
yeah.
goes to something else that is controlled by the NC2A that benefits the the athletes.
Let
And
me ask
who
you
knows
another
if
question
okay,
because I think just unintended consequences, and I don't want to get into any of my solutions yet. I want to just talk through yours. So right now, at least I know of four or five, and it's not written down and confirmed, but the okay, and you mentioned the TV revenues going all to the players.
right.
Collective pays for staff and all that, but let's just talk about players. The top 5, we'll say, it's 5-ish, it may be 4, it may be 6 rosters currently are $40 million.
Mhm,
So when you go put this in place, what's gonna happen when you already have rolling salaries back, rolling what players are making back, all that is a real challenge. No
mhm,
different than you walk into a company and say, "Okay, everybody's gonna get a 60% pay cut."
right.
There's gonna be some free will and something that can happen there. I do think this is where the NFL would get involved because they're going to start seeing their talent development league fall apart a little bit. But how do you deal with, and this is where I'm, when I get to a counter solution a little bit, I think that there might be a way to deal with it. It's where I think you end up with an issue. Socialism, it's the problem with socialism of the people that are driven at the top making all the money are getting screwed because it's going to go to all these different programs that aren't generating near the money, but you walk into Alabama, Texas Tech, Texas, Ohio State, Michigan, and say, "Cool, you're not getting a $40 million roster anymore. It's going to be 15." What are they going to
Mhm.
do?
Well, first of all, if you and especially the transition between what these guys are making now and all of a sudden now I can't afford to pay $6 million for a transfer quarterback, that sort of thing. As long as you say this is gonna be initiated most of these a lot of these NIL discussions, they call it NIL, but it's actually collectives paying,
Yeah, it's just salary.
these folks. Uh, these things are being negotiated when these guys are in high school or trying to entice someone to jump into the portal and make the transfer. Now, we've already addressed the transfer portal.
Right.
That's gonna cut a lot of that down. All of a sudden, the kid who's a sophomore in high school and he's projected to be a five-star begins to realize I am not going to get $5 million to sign with Alabama because they don't have that kind of, they're not going to make that kind of offer. And so what? I mean,
You're gonna end up with a bagman again, though. The kids are going to demand that they're going to get paid. It's
no,
just
not if you have the right framework in place and
SMU will be back.
you
The
have the
Pony
right
Express will
penalties.
be back.
But you've got that already. You got that at NIL. Get one of your boosters to pay that quarterback an additional 2.5 million a year to make 3 commercials for him. You know what? That's none of my business and none of yours.
Yeah,
And that's all that it was before. It was NIL, but they really weren't doing anything.
it just wasn't
And
legal.
I'm not sure how much of the NIL money that is being paid to a lot of these athletes now that is not coming from collectives. Is theoretically coming through
Yeah,
a personal services contract, and there may not be any
yeah,
services going on. We don't have any control over that, nor should we. That is strictly a contractual agreement between an athlete and a company. As long as the university stays out of it and we
Are
keep
they
the
accountable for
collectives.
it though or not? Are
What's
the
that?
universities gonna be accountable for compliance?
With NIL, who cares? Who cares? I don't even know what compliance there needs to be.
Well, if I'm a
If
coach and I go into somebody's house and sit down with them, and
Mhm.
this is gonna happen, and I say we'll use Lane Kiffin, he follows people around in airports after visits, so we'll just say that I'm Lane Kiffin, and I'm
Mhm.
sitting down in a family's home talking about getting their kid,
Mhm.
then is it okay for me to make an introduction to some rich guy who's got a used car lot who they're gonna make a thing for, and I'm using that to leverage to get the players?
So what? That is between that kid and that company, and the university
But if the
should not be
coach
in
is
the middle of it. Now,
arranging
if
it but they're
is
going
the
to,
coach gonna be a facilitator?
100%.
Sure, but the coach is facilitating all kinds of things, the, uh, dormitory food that you're gonna be able to be given, the level of, assistance you're gonna have for your classes, in terms of private tutoring, and you can sell all sorts of things there. His relationship with people in the NFL and scouts and decision makers, this sort of thing, and he's gonna push that. Um, we can't protect them from everything. The NIL is something that, quite honestly, the only reason it's the business of the conferences and the colleges right now is that these collectives are associated with the universities. But if we would bring the NIL back to what it was originally supposed to be, which is finally we're going to allow an athlete who's a great quarterback to sign contracts with businesses and get paid. And as long as that's all that's going on, it's the collectives that have screwed things up and turned this into a branch office of the university athletic department, funding, raising the funds, and paying these players. We got to stop that, and then let's forget about the NIL. That's if a kid who is a great 11-year-old basketball player at a local league can negotiate $1 million a year contract with Nike to wear their tennis shoes, that's none of our business. And we need to quit worrying about that. It's probably not good for the kid and probably not going to happen with Nike, but I'm just saying that that is nothing but a personal services agreement that the universities should have no part. They shouldn't be. If you want to make the introductions, fine. And you're right. There's going to have to be some policing.
But
Is
here's
this really nothing but a collective by a different name? But that should not be that difficult
but here's what I think is gonna
to
drive
police.
some of it though, and here's a major problem, and again, it feels a little bit like socialism. So if I look at Ohio State, we'll take somebody that neither one of us
Mhm,
have allegiance to, and they got a $40 million roster. And I look at the SEC and I look at the Big Ten, who's generating all the revenue? I don't have to go do a lot of research. The SEC and the Big Ten, you're 12.5 million. Ironic or 12.5, the NFL annual TV contracts and revenue, which most of theirs comes from TV contracts, is 12, a little over 12 billion. So I think it's
mhm,
interesting. That's for
mhm.
32 teams of just football. Then we're going to take 12.5 billion and we're going to spread it over all these schools. The piece I don't like, and I think is going to cause some compliance issues is, why is Ohio State putting the best quality of product on the field, the most talent? They're getting more viewers, they're packing their stadium, but I don't know, pick a school that's, in some random conference at the bottom of the ACC or the bottom of the whatever. Why are they gonna get the same salary cap as, say, Tulane? One of those schools that was in the playoffs, say James Madison. Why is James Madison gonna get the same salary cap as Ohio State when they
That's a
generated
good
nothing? And so
that mhm.
here's where I think, and some of what I agree because you've got to put a cap in place and you got to put some bounds around it. I think trying to spread that 12.5 billion equal 33 million over every school and you do it by sport gets challenging. And I do think you could do it with Olympic sports and some of what you're saying. I do think you got to get back to, and this is some of what I said earlier, you got to get back to last week's discussion. You got to put some structure around the conferences. And maybe it's the 60 or 64, whichever model of hours you went with. Maybe that's got a number to it. Then you start looking a lot like the NFL. And then you got FBS, FCS. The FCS gets something, but it's not the same. I think it's going to be a real challenge, and I think you're gonna make a watered down sport that's not fun to watch because it's not going to be fun to watch
Let me tell you why
everybody
I
be at the
disagree.
meeting.
Let me tell
Yeah,
you why I disagree. Why does Cleveland the have the same salary cap as Kansas City?
no, I
You can't
agree,
even
but
you can't even compare the quality of the product that's going out there,
you've got 32 teams, not 300.
but it doesn't matter. It's just math. It's just math.
Yeah, I think it gets
And
watered down at some point. To say that,
To say that Alabama and Michigan and Ohio State and Texas are driving all the revenue, yeah, because they've had the advantages for the last 60 years from a revenue standpoint, a TV contract standpoint, an under the table, NIL of the olden days ability
well, they
that
got more
a lot
alumni.
of other
They've
schools that,
graduated more people.
and
I mean, they've graduated more people than James Madison has, so they've got more. They just got more funds. They got more facilities just to start from because they got
but
more alumni
they
base.
haven't graduated more people than Indiana.
Agree, and Indiana just won with money.
Just once. Okay. But we're not talking, Indiana is not Ohio State, Alabama, Texas, those kind.
So you
There
think
has
the
been a,
300 team should get the same thing as Ohio State does, and
in,
that's going to make a better. Are we trying to
for
make a better
their,
product for the fans or not? Because if we're not trying to make a better product for the fans, I just
why
don't think
wouldn't
that
it?
makes a
If
better
they've got
product.
the same money to spend on football so that they can go out and compete for these great players and they can offer that quarterback $1.5 million, just like Ohio State. Ohio State can't give it all. I mean, that's the problem right now. If they've got more money, they're going to end up with better players, more better players. If everybody has the same amount, now you better be really good in your analysis of who you're paying the money to and how you're handling those kids that are not getting a bunch of money, that may be lucky if they're getting 5,000 a year as kind of a kick in the pants for being riding the bench. That becomes a matter of managing your talent, managing your roster, and managing your money. Um, I don't see any reason why Ohio State should get more money than Rice. Give them the same amount of money to work with, and let's see if Rice can pull itself up to a level. We talked about it before. We want it to get to like the NFL, where it's competitive every week.
I think
You
the challenge,
really
though,
never know.
here's the thing. You mentioned the Cleveland Browns, and so
Mhm.
it's a bad example. NFL
I know it's
stadiums are
bad
plus or
management.
minus.
Yeah.
Well, no, the NFL they're plus or minus 5,000 fans in a stadium. The stadium's
Mhm.
seating.
Right.
And again, the Browns have loyal fans. They sell a
Right.
lot of season tickets, and they have people show up just like the Kansas City Chiefs do. Comparing Ohio State and Michigan and Bama and Texas and even Texas Tech, stadium's not as big. Oregon stadium's smaller to a 300th team is not like comparing the Chiefs and the Browns. They're not even playing the same sport. It's two different games.
Right
And I think
now it
again,
is.
that's where I think you got to tier. There's
But
not enough
can
talent and
you bring
coaches
it
to go
up?
around. Nope.
Can you bring Tulane up to the level if you've got the same financial resources?
There's not enough players and talent to make that
I'm
happen.
not willing to abdicate the game. You're wanting me to abdicate the game to a couple of dozen teams at the most,
I don't
couple
think
dozen
everybody gets a
schools.
trophy.
Not
Not
willing to,
everybody gets. But the
I'm not
problem
willing to
here's
do
my
that.
my fundamental problem is it's that everybody gets a trophy because you've got a top tier. You won't have enough TV channels. So to say that James Madison and all these other teams are going to generate the TV revenue, they're not going to. There's not enough channels on YouTube TV if you added 40 more to show all those games. So you're still going to end up with because the fan bases. Yes, Indiana had more people at the national championship than Miami did because they got more people. But again, we can throw in Indiana and a few other. How many big schools are there that have got football programs that have that kind of alumni or fan base that are going to generate the TV revenue? You've got, we'll call it 30, you know, 60, the number that we talked about that I think you can say that's being very generous. Again, it's not that many. It's the Big Ten and the SEC. There's a reason TV is paying them so much money, and there's a reason the ACC contract doesn't look the same. It's all about viewership and eyes. So, how many SEC and Big Ten teams are there? 30 ish. That's who's generating the most revenue. That's why TV's paying for. So you're going to take all those 30 teams and spread it over 300. I don't like that. It feels a lot
Yeah.
like socialism to me. And what's the end goal? What are we trying
Well,
to do by doing that?
it is socialism to a certain extent. So is the NFL.
But again, it's a
So is
finite,
so
small,
is the NBA.
but there's
How
a small
many
number of teams. I agree with philosophically, I agree with you. I just think it's not 300 teams.
well,
You can't take
but
from 10. Let's talk the NFL model for a minute. You can't take the NFL if we say there's, a third of the league that's generating a lot of the talent and they're the ones that are going to win and all that, and they're generating more TV revenue and you're spreading it. The SEC also did that for many, many years. Vandy was getting the same amount of money that everybody else, and it made them more competitive. But again, you're spreading that revenue, the 12.5 billion, over, because of that 12.5 billion, it'd be interesting to go look and see how much of that is the SEC and the Big Ten. I guarantee you it's 65% of it. And so you're going to take that and spread it over everything. The NFL, if you say half the league's teams or even a third of them are generating all the revenue, you're spreading over 30, not 300. So philosophically, I think I'm okay with it because it works in the NFL. I think the problem is trying to spread it equally across the entire NCAA Division
well,
One.
but what if you
It
did
waters it
this
down.
though? What if you did this? You were asking, what if Creighton doesn't have a football team?
Right.
The cap, whatever the cap is, okay, for football programs, can be increased if we're only got 130 teams
Now
instead
we're
of
getting somewhere. That's what I
360.
was thinking. Yes.
And if you do that, now it's going to raise that level of revenue.
Yes.
And yes, I understand that, hey, let's just give it all to Notre Dame. They
Yeah.
probably still outdraw everybody else
Yeah.
on a national basis with their football games, even when they're lousy.
Yeah.
They're still going to outdraw most everyone else, unless it's an Alabama, Georgia, or something of that nature, Texas, Oklahoma. They're just going to. You want to just give them all the money then? They're drawing
No.
more.
So you're on to what I was saying. That's why I asked you earlier, what would you do with that extra money? I
Yeah,
think
if we did it that way, right, and so Texas Tech would not get any revenue for gymnastics, nor would anybody else who does not field a gymnastics team, and that's going to raise the revenue, and it might entice a Texas Tech to say, "Hey, if
that's what I
we
was
can
gonna say
get a
too. It may
piece of
make
that,
Creighton want a
maybe
football
that will."
team.
Yeah, exactly,
I
exactly.
still
So
think though, again, what problem are we trying to solve? We're not trying to make you're not trying to make right now you got 132 for whatever the number is teams.
right, hmm
I don't think you're trying to create what based on what we talked about last week. We're now arguing a different thing. I don't think you want to make 300 football teams be the same. You can't. There's not enough talent. The NFL
no,
doesn't have 32 good quarterbacks. They've got
right,
5 and the rest are mediocre at best you've never
hmm
heard of. There's
hmm
not enough college quarterbacks to go around to make it at that
right.
level. So I think here's my only point, and I think I would agree with you fully. I just think it's got to be if you take it all and pull it. Which, by the way, what's funny to me is the only thing Tony Petitti and Greg Sankey agree on right now is that everything we're talking about is the worst idea ever, and revenue sharing equally is terrible. They
Sure,
100% are in lockstep.
and I understand why
They
they're
wrote
saying that.
letters, yeah, because they want to
Yeah,
keep the
they want to keep it
stranglehold on
just
it,
like it is. Sure, they do.
right? So here's what I think that's funny. Anytime you see two people agreeing that don't like each other, you probably need to ask why. Um, so go back to what we did last week, and instead of trying to make 300 good teams, my point was if you don't have football, throw that money back in the pool. You can increase the salary cap on that. You still are going to have, just like you do in the NFL. Part of the
Right.
reason the Chiefs are better is because they do have more season ticket sales. They got more merchandise sales. So you got other differentiators. You got alumni who are
But
going to
part of
give
that
money
is
for
because of
facilities.
their success as a team.
It is.
Which
And so
came first, the chicken or the egg?
no, and you're
It's not
getting,
the facility, it's the wins and losses.
agree. And then you got the Packers, which is an interesting thing. They're the only team in the league that doesn't have an owner,
Right.
but yet they've got great facilities and they do other
Well,
things.
they got about 78,000 owners.
They do.
Yeah.
I think, though, my only real problem with what you're saying is I agree because I think it works in the NFL and it creates parity. And I'm all about parity to a certain point. And when you take and try to make too many things have parity, you water down everything. It's no child. We're going to segue to our education when we get to that. It's no child left behind.
Mhm.
I don't believe when George Bush said that he intended to make everybody dumber. I do think it had that effect a little bit because you end up not serving the top end, trying to hit the bottom end. And what if you did end up tiering things where, hey, we are still going to have high end student things, but we're going to better cater to these? That's all I'm saying with football is if you got FBS Division 1 and Division 2 or FCS, FBS, whatever, you end up with, hey, they're generating a lot of the revenue, so therefore they should probably have a higher salary cap. You can still have 2 competitive leagues. I don't think, because I think no matter what you do, back to what we were just saying, if you give revenue to everybody, just TV revenue, there's gonna be enough differentiating revenue that you're still gonna have a disparity between the 300th team and the number 2 team. So why not go ahead and recognize that and make 2 and try to create parity within both of those and have playoffs with both of
Well,
them?
let me ask you this, okay? If we're gonna give more money to the SEC and to ACC and to, Big Ten because they generate the most revenue, why are you giving it to Vanderbilt?
No, I'm
Why
not
are you
saying
giving it to Purdue?
that's not what
So
I'm
what are you
saying.
gonna do? You're gonna give more of it then to Michigan and more of it to Ohio State than you
No,
give to Purdue?
that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying within the 64 or 60, whichever team. I'm going back
Uh-huh,
to last week. We agreed
uh-huh,
on the playoff format
right,
and the number in the conferences.
right.
Everybody in those conferences
Gets the
takes
same
their
amount?
revenue and equal sharing. I'm just saying don't take those 30 because those 60 for sure are generating a lot more money than the next 60.
Okay, and I can get if we wanna get down to that level, I can agree with that, but let me also throw this out as a possibility. If everybody has the same salary cap, now revenue or income paid to players becomes much less of an issue. Now you better be selling your facilities. You better be selling the quality of your coaching staff. You better be selling the quality of the education. You better be selling how many people I'm putting into the NFL on an annual basis. Those things that right now I think are very much overlooked because it becomes a matter of, well, I'll just offer you 6 million to come to Texas Tech and play quarterback for me.
Yeah.
And so if you take the power of that money, if you lessen the power of that salary, now I better be able to sell some other things other than just I can write you a bigger check than the other guys can. So that it's possible that that could be beneficial. I don't know, but I'm willing to buy cutting that number down. I just want to make certain that we have a way of funding in an equitable manner the women's field hockey teams. Doesn't mean they're going to get as much as the football program, but for those back east schools up in the Northeast who are still Division One and who take their field hockey very seriously, let's give those athletes a chance to earn some revenue as well. And they still are part of the TV contracts. These TV contracts have this kind of a hodgepodge of a contract that picks up all of those other sports that mainly we see on
Yeah.
Saturday morning at 9:30 on ESPNU, but they've got their followers
Yeah.
and they should be able to share in that revenue. It certainly shouldn't all be going to football. So working that out is not easy. I don't think it's impossible. And I'm sick and tired of hearing about people's egos. I don't care if the SEC thinks they're the best. I'm not convinced.
Yeah.
I'm
No,
not
I
convinced
don't.
that the Big Ten is the best.
Well, we
They
talked
have
about it.
been in recent years.
It depends on what you define
You
as
want to go back
best.
20 years, I could make that case for the Pac-10.
Yeah. No, it
You
depends
want to
on
go
what you
back,
define as best.
you want to go back 30 or 40 years, I could make that for the Southwest Conference when Texas and Oklahoma were there and
So
Arkansas.
here's a question for you, Randy. So in the NFL, I spend a lot of time looking at the NFL model, and I'll talk a little bit
Mhm.
about some of that. Again, I think there's a model that works. So I tend to like to look at models that work and don't
Right,
reinvent it, just
right.
emulate them. Of the $12.5 billion ish in the NFL, 48 to 50% is all of the TV revenue that goes to the players. So I think that's an interesting thing, even in college football. And I don't know the numbers, but that TV revenue doesn't any of it go to the players right now. So here's something I worry about is you're moving sources around. The schools get this revenue sharing. They can do with it whatever they want within reason. They can't pay players, ironically. Um, but a lot of the schools, again, if you go to largest alumni bases, wealthiest, oil money, whatever, those schools can pay for their facilities for everything. They got
Mhm.
better golf facilities, they got better
Right.
gymnastics facilities. Well, a lot of those schools, and Vandy's not a good example. They've got a pretty good alumni base, but go to a Mississippi State. Go to some of the other schools like that. Go to, I don't know, pick a East Carolina, and they're using TV revenue to build stadiums and facilities and do some of that. So I worry a little bit about if you say 100% of the TV revenue, and that's part of my problem with, because 30 million sounds like a lot, per team if you're giving it all the players. The problem is that's not reality because that's not where it goes now. None of it goes to the players. So you're going to take the ability for them to fund facilities, and it's not just coaching staff. So there's 100 people, just support staff, and then you got the people that take care of the stadiums. A lot of that money that currently is TV revenue obviously doesn't go to the players. It goes to all that other stuff. And so I worry a little bit about, especially for, again, I'm not worried about the top 10. They'll take care of every sport and they'll be good at every sport that they
Mhm.
decide to participate in. But when you get down to number 57, how are they going to fund, track and field facilities? How are
I
they
don't
going to
know, but
fund
they
some of those?
I don't know, but they need to figure it out. Go to Kansas State's football stadium and go to Texas Tech's. Who in the world said Kansas State deserves the same kind of facility that Texas Tech does?
Are you going to
Who
create more
says
parity with
Mississippi
this
State
though?
deserves who says Mississippi State deserves the same type of facility that University of Texas has?
So all your okay, so let me go back to the title of this. Your ultimate end goal is equitable funding. You don't care about what the outcome or parity or the fan experience
That's
is.
up to the schools. That's up, you look at the Dallas Cowboys and the money that Jerry Jones has spent and the money they spend every year and what they pay athletes and what they pay coaching staff and how lousy they have been for the last 25 years.
But he's one of the best business guys and his family's in the best
Well,
spot ever. So
but doesn't everything do it, but not his football team. I mean,
I
it's just it is how well are you gonna manage your resources? You know that because you have a company that manages its resources very well. Hopefully, you will continue to do that until somebody
I don't have
decides to
people
give you a
dictating what I
gazillion
can and
dollars and
can't
you don't have to
spend
ma
though. But
but,
I and
but
NFL owners don't have people telling me how I get to allocate the money that comes in. We figured that out.
yeah, they do. That as far as player salaries, they do.
No, player salaries, but not anything else. And they
Right,
don't, the source of where that money comes from to pay the players, nobody gives them that, or they get to tell it. The
no, it's
TV
the
revenue is a
owners that
piece of
do
it.
it. Well, you know what? If I really care about football at the University of Illinois, then I will put together a group of people and we will make it a big deal and we'll come up with the funding. And if you don't come up with the funding, it's kind of like a nonprofit that says, well, we're going bankrupt, so the government needs to give us some money so that we have the same level playing field as these other nonprofits. No,
But
it
that's
may
part of my
mean
concern. So if I think that's a good example. I don't know that Illinois' football team's ever been good or will be. I
you
like
have to go
using them.
back a ways.
I don't even know any Illinois football fans, so I like picking on them. Nobody will get mad at us for that. Um, here's another piece of my problem with, I just can't get past the everybody gets 15 million in salary cap, because let's say Illinois, for example, they're going to not have the people that are excited about it. They're not going to invest in a stadium. They're not going to invest in other things, but they're still going to get 15 million to put a terrible product out there. They're going to pay a bunch of players to have a terrible product. That doesn't create, back to our thing of we both like with Josh Pate, that doesn't create a better fan experience just by having a team that happens to get 15 million to field a team. And I worry even Creighton. If I'm Creighton or anybody else, I want every team because I want all the money I can get. Is that making a better overall product?
Yeah, but let me ask you this: what's the difference in that and Illinois having $6 million to spend on player salaries, and Ohio State having 36 million? They're still not going to have an equal product on the field. It's
Yeah,
just
but
that
my problem,
the disparity is going to be even greater. And you know what? If they're taking some of that money from Ohio State, I don't care. If Ohio
uh,
State really cares, then you've got a winning program. If you've got a fan base that gives a crap about that, they will come up with the funds. And
yeah, the
Illinois
problem,
may never. You're probably right.
that's why I don't like though the fact that you're going to take. I would rather watch Ohio State, Bama, Texas Tech, whoever be good at a super high level and leave it how it is than I had to give Illinois more of their money to make their product not as good.
Yeah, but see, I don't chase logos like that. Give me a good football game. I've watched some Division III games on Saturday morning at 10 o'clock, and they're pretty darn good, and they're
You and I've talked about
interesting
it.
because
I
I love
I
the
agree.
game.
I agree,
you know?
but I guess trying to define because you have that now. So what are trying to rearrange funding, what outcome are you trying to change?
I believe
Moving all the
at the end of the day, I believe the NC2A, if you wanna call it that, is going to be far more competitive across the board. More and more conferences are gonna look more and more like the SEC, where they're closer together top to bottom. The games are gonna be far more interesting. Uh, and nobody can just mail it in over a weekend because they're playing a crappy team. I just believe we can close the gap.
I
Does that
fully
still,
agree. Yeah, I
it
fully
could
agree,
be that
but
Ohio State and Alabama and those guys are still going to be the best.
I fully agree, but I
Maybe
don't
so.
agree with taking it from the I don't and again, and maybe we've agreed, and I'm digging it back up. I agree with that, but I don't agree with taking it from Ohio State and giving it to James Madison.
But
That's
see,
not gonna
that's
make a better product.
you're focusing too much on individual schools. This should be a
No, I'm
single
talking about groupings.
television.
You brought
It's
up the
no, I
SEC,
forget about
Randy,
the groupings. I'm just saying that the
but you gotta
NC2A
group it some
football,
way.
it
You
but
can't do it across the whole thing. It won't work.
yes, but you can. You can have a single contract, first of all, for college football, Division One, for lack of a better term. Okay. And if whether that's 64 teams or 130, whatever, you have a singular contract. So nobody's going to sit back. Nobody is giving Kansas City or Dallas or Pittsburgh their share of NFL revenue based on their viewership. That doesn't exist. And you can say, well, that could work with 32 teams. It can't work with 130 teams. Why? It's just math.
Because the
Yes, it
disparity
can.
between the Cleveland Browns viewership and the Kansas City Chiefs is not the same as Ohio State versus
It's
East Carolina.
irrelevant.
It's not even close. It is
That's
irrelevant. It's
no,
relevant
it's
because the inputs, you got to have some proportion to the outputs. And the Browns, I guarantee if you look at how many people are watching them every Sunday, it's not even close to the disparity between East Carolina and Ohio State. It's not even close.
that's because the NFL has not allowed there to be that much of a variance between the top of the league and the bottom of the league, even going back to when there were only 12 teams. Well, maybe back then, but certainly not in the modern era, the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. You have created that level of parity over time. I think you can do that. I certainly think you can do it with 64 teams.
Well, I think with 64, I'm not disagreeing with you. You
And
can't do it with 300 though.
you may be able to do it with 130. I don't
Hmm.
know. I don't know that for certain, but
Name me another sport in the world that has 130 that they create parity by revenue sharing. One
probably
sport,
probably soccer.
not 130 in any league.
Yeah.
It's just too many. Again, I agree with the concept. It works, NFL, but you can't go beyond whether it's
Well,
64.
then in your model, you need to cut it off and you need to say Division 1 or FBS or FCS or whatever is going to include these 64 schools. And
And then
that's
I'm
it,
okay
which
with
is
revenue
kind of what we
sharing.
did last week.
Right, and
Now,
that's what I'm saying, but I'm also fine with revenue sharing and subsidy, and I said this last week. From that top 64, they're gonna help subsidize the next 64 as well,
I wouldn't do
just
that.
not at the same level.
We don't do it with Division 2 and we don't do it with Division 3. They have their own contracts.
Well, it
So let
absolutely
them
happens
go
right
out,
now. That
let those other teams go out and negotiate. Let
and I'm okay
Division
with that, but
2.
that's not how it works right now. That's part of the problem with Tulane and James Madison. That's where the antitrust them. You're gonna have that's not tenable because you will end up with antitrust lawsuits forever. That's why right now Tulane and that group of 5 get their automatic bid, is because of the antitrust. You've got to address that some way.
But you know what? If you're going to do that, then uh, Doane University in Crete, Nebraska, should be able to get into the NC2A college football
Well,
playoff.
maybe, but I'm just telling you the current we can't
Well, why
solve the
can't
problem
they?
without looking at the
No,
well,
first of all, they
again,
can't.
there
The
are
CFP
current
rules will not
antitrust,
allow it.
but
So
there
if
are current
antitrust
anti
legislation works for Tulane, it works for Doane University.
yeah, but they haven't sued. You gotta take the current
Well, I'm
landscape
just
and
saying you're opening up that possibility. First of all, the NC2A's got to have antitrust exemption, and that's not that hard
we've
to
talked
do.
about that.
Congress
Yeah,
has just got to agree to do it,
that's hard.
and it can happen, and it's being proposed by most everybody. And so you do that first. You got to get the legal stuff out of the way before you can do any of
I
this
agree.
anyway.
Yeah.
So set that in place. And now, guess what, FCS? Go have your own championship.
Yeah,
Find
no,
a
I
way
agree.
to fund it. You know what? Doane College fields a football team every year, and guess what? I'm sure they lose money every
No,
year.
UNA in Florence, Alabama, has been multi-time Division II national champion without
Yeah,
all the
and who
TV revenue and
knows?
everything.
Yeah, right, right.
Well, and that's where again you're coming back to what my whole problem with it is, and I really, I'm being generous to say let 64. Here's another thing, and I thought about this morning. Okay, so 64 teams are in this thing. Let's just say
Mhm.
hypothetically, they're going to revenue share all that. FCS, your next, y'all are all out. You got to do your own. Well, what are you going to do? And the NFL, they can go do it as well, and maybe it's fine within our transfer portal rules and everything else. Is and the NFL does it to college football right now, so maybe it's going to be okay. But that top level 64 teams or 60 teams are going to use that second level for player development.
Sure they are.
And
You're absolutely
if as
right.
long as you're okay with that, that's why I'm saying I think the NFL should pay a little bit for the development in college football, maybe kick in a little money for the top level. That top level funds the next level some. And then you end up with not a lot of animosity when a player leaves, wherever, James Madison, and goes to Ohio State because it was a good
Well,
move for everybody.
if you're gonna take all of that major television contract revenue, and you're gonna give that to 64 teams, there probably is some room there
Yeah.
for that consortium of 64 teams to say, "Yes, and we're gonna give 10% of that or whatever
Yes.
to the FCS."
Yep.
And then they can deal with that under their own set of guidelines and rules and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I would buy that. I would buy
Yeah.
into that. Yeah,
Yeah. My only issue is I think, and yeah, theoretically, maybe. Reality gets in the way. Theoretically, you might be able to get 500 teams to all be good. I just know that historically there's 32 teams in the NFL. I mean, you go look at every sports league, soccer, cricket, they don't have 400 teams. Trying to manage that, we can't even manage a handful right now trying to get this to work, is how do you take a step if you're going to do revenue sharing, what are you doing it? And again, if you keep it in a little bit tighter circle, and then you figure out how to work within top circle, next circle, and you do some things, and maybe it's not fair because life's not fair, and the top one's generating a little more, and hey, we're going to make you give some, but given equal share, I don't know that you end up with equal outcome because I do agree. I would just as soon watch an FCS game as I had a good FBS as long as the quality's the same. Two mediocre teams playing each other are fine, but to
mhm.
think you're going to create 300 and the 298 teams going to play Ohio State and it's going to be a fun game to watch, it's still because of all the other reasons we talked about. I think you're going to have some disparity. And
Yeah.
it's what
Uh,
because the method is equitable revenue sharing. That's not an
right,
outcome. If that's your only outcome,
right,
you're not going to end up with a better.
right.
What is that unto? That's unto ultimately you're trying to create a more manageable league. You're trying to create more of what we talked about the last couple of weeks and more structure to create a product that's at least as good, if not better, and sustainable.
And I
Because
think,
really,
yeah, I think
we're talking about the sustainability is what we're talking about. We're
right.
not.
I think
We have a
what
sustainability issue in the sports.
what you and I are discussing here really is how do we define equitable?
Yes,
Because equitable is not equal.
right.
Okay, so
And
and
what's it
this may
unto? I
be
think
the
it's because it's the method. I think you got to do this, and I think if something's got to be done, I think something is going to be done. Is okay the equitable funding, but what is your intended outcome? You got to
right.
define what are we hoping to, and then maybe again if that's defined well enough, maybe it is we want 200 teams. I don't
Yeah,
know, but I
I
think
don't.
you would have
I
to
think what
define that.
we're. I think we stated it a couple of sessions ago. At I think for you and I both, it's a better fan experience
Yes,
across the board.
yes,
Okay, I mean, one could say, well, Ohio State and Texas and Alabama and Georgia, they always have a great fan experience. Yeah,
yeah,
they do. But we're talking about across the board.
yeah.
How can we make it a better fan experience?
And I
And
think
maybe you can't do it with 300 teams or
that's my
130
point.
teams.
I think
Um,
one of the worst case scenarios anytime you make change is to break things that aren't broken.
yeah,
And so, how do we take what is great? I think everybody would agree. I mean, college football is up there. It's in the top two or three, depending on how big a baseball fan you are. But the NFL and college athletics are pretty one clearly, and then two, you could argue about a couple different things, but it's up there. So, how do you take what it is, and it's really not necessarily make it better, because most people say it's really good. It's really to me it's the sustainability, because I think most people
Mhm.
agree the model that is working will not continue for another 10 years,
Oh,
because
no,
it's
absolutely.
trending toward chaos, complete full on chaos. So how do you take what it is? Don't break it. Keep what it is, preserve it as close to what it is. You use the word guardrails. I had guardrails on here too. We don't have any guardrails right now. How do
Right.
we define guardrails around what they are without tearing it completely apart? And I think that's my fundamental issue with the whole sharing revenue so far out is you're taking something, the SEC model and the Big Ten model have worked. I mean, Vandy's a good
Well,
example of that. Vandy's a good team now.
they've worked for the Big Ten and the,
That's why I think you expand that out a little bit more to a manageable number. NFL, it works with 32. And again, I think you could do that. I think it's a challenge to, again, I don't want to break what's already there by,
right.
making it unwieldy.
But if you've got a TV contract written in such a way, especially with the money that has been tossed to the SEC
Yeah.
and to the Big Ten by the networks, guess who's gonna get more games on TV?
Oh, yeah.
And it may not necessarily be because the quality of the play is better. It
Right.
may be because we signed a 10-year contract with these guys for this many millions and millions of dollars. So guess what? They're getting the TV airtime. And
Well,
now
and
we're going to
pay,
sit back and say, and we're going to use that as the benchmark for which we give them future money.
right.
Well, they've got a monopoly on it anyway.
Well, and Josh Pate's talked about it too, I believe, and I think he's right, and I think the NFL is a good example of it. I think it's where Patiti and Sankey don't like it. I think, and again, I'm not within the bounds of a 64-ish thing and then doing something with FCS. I think if you put all that together, because I
Mhm.
do think there are fans of Indiana, name a bunch of the schools, that would love to see their teams play more prime time on predominant on, nice networks on a Saturday night that they don't have an opportunity to do. So I do think the rising tides floats all boats scenario is if you take our 60 or 64 team thing from last year,
Mhm.
or last week, put all that together and make a TV deal for that. I think a couple things happens. I think, and Pate has gone into this in detail. I think you end up with a lot more money. So I think that
Oh,
twelve and a
I
half
would agree.
billion
I
could be
completely agree.
25
Yes.
billion. And
Right.
then you can fund those all at a better level, make that parity within that. Then you could fund some FCS, and then you do the same thing for FCS. But the other thing that's interesting is who, from a fan perspective, and Pate's been really good about this, as a fan, you know, I think for a long time watching the SEC on CBS was painful with Gary and Vern, and so it was awful. But man, if you got to see your team play on Fox one night and see the NFL, look where all they are now. They're on Amazon, ESPN, NBC, CBS. I think having more opportunities to watch all those teams on different networks, all those teams and all those networks, instead of it being ESPN, Fox, and CBS, you get more networks to the party with more teams. It is going to raise that cap
Including streaming systems as well.
100%. I mean,
And
NFL's doing it.
and and I'll tell you, if that could come about, and I don't know that it can because everybody's protecting their own little empire, the NC2A or college football would outdraw the NFL.
Yeah, and they
I
could
have no
also
doubts.
then,
In fact,
if you do that, you
I
can
would like
fund
to
all the
see.
well, you can
I'm
fund
sorry,
all the other sport. No, at that point, everything we were talking about earlier, and again, that's why I think you and I were arguing a hypothetical that doesn't even matter. Um,
probably.
because if you really look at the 64, let's focus on
Mhm.
what we already built.
Right.
And you could, instead of 12 and a half, you could generate 20, which I do think you bring more streaming
Mhm.
services, more networks, you got more viewers. Man, you can make that product better, and I do think the NFL probably should look out because you basically have got another professional sports league instead of the USFL. You've got college football that is
Mhm.
got more rabid fan bases and more people in stadiums than the NFL. So the NFL may not be a fan, but I do think there's a reason that Patiti and Sankey are looking at it. They are the only two I've heard vehemently arguing against this, and I think they may
Right.
get outweighed. And I think this is where I thought about it, and Pete mentioned it. Sankey may be playing both ends of this because if
Oh, he
he's
could be.
smart, he may end up being the guy that's the commissioner of college football that gets to run the 64 thing or whatever it is. But at that point, the rising tides not only floats more football boats, but then you can go with more Olympic sports and all that because you got money to fund all that because there's going to be
Right.
more money. There's more
I mean,
networks.
I'd love to see the numbers, and this is conjecture on my part based on nothing, but I would almost guarantee you that there is more revenue generated in the March Madness NC2A championships than there is in the NBA playoffs all the way
Oh, I
through.
bet there is.
And I'll
I'll,
guarantee you
I'll find out real quick for you.
there's more fan interest and more people across the country who are not basketball fans are going to follow March Madness than are going to follow the NBA. I don't even know. I know that Denver got beat the other night. I don't watch NBA
I
basketball
didn't remember that
until
Denver
the
had an NBA
championships.
basketball team, so that's where I stand.
So you may be right. I think on the football side of this thing, we could create if calmer heads will prevail and people will set aside their biases to their own teams and their own conferences and look at what's best for the fan. I think you could end up with a juggernaut that goes beyond what the professional sports are able to generate. I think the thing we need to bear in mind is it's money that caused this problem,
Yep.
and ultimately how we handle that money is going to be what resolves it. You got to remember that back in the day, all of these teams were nothing but club sports. They were not funded by the colleges. They were a bunch of guys going out and begging for local donations so they could have some leather pads and a leather helmet with no face mask to play this game called football.
Yep.
Basketball uh, needed some peach baskets to keep my guys in shape for football season.
Yep.
So look what it has become, and that has been great. But if we're not careful, it also can be what destroys it, and I don't want to see that happen.
So
Whatever
ChatGPT
it's going to
says
take.
the March Madness generates $1 billion in
I'm
TV
sorry.
revenue, probably another billion in ads, and then there's 3 billion wagered in gambling. So just in 1 month, you got a billion in TV revenue. It says it's bigger than NFL or the NBA, but it's not a good comparison because you
Yeah.
got fewer teams in the NBA playoffs. But you're generating billions just with 64 teams playing
Right.
for
Over
a
a
month. So it's
2 week period
hard
of
for me to
time. Yeah.
believe
Yeah.
that 64 teams playing a 12 game season in football, doesn't it simple math, 12 times that is and I don't think it's proportional, but you've got a month versus the season with 12 games each, 64 in both of them. It's hard to believe the
Mhm.
football. There's 100,000 people in football stadiums, and it's a more popular sport right now that you couldn't do more than 12.5 billion.
Yeah.
If you
Well,
pulled
I
it all
think,
together.
this one tonight may have been a little closer to the 85-15
I
or
love it.
maybe even 80-20, but I do think we want to see the same, we want to get to the same end.
Yeah,
What's the best way to do it, especially with everything we have to overcome?
yeah.
And it's like eating an elephant one bite at a time. S- Somebody's got to take the reins, and I don't know who that is, and guide us through this. And there's got to be some clout that individual or the group of individuals has, and no, an executive order doesn't get it done.
No,
Okay,
and what you
sorry,
said
but
earlier, the
everybody's already forgotten about that.
I know the
Nobody
money and
cares.
what you said is important. I mean, the money got us into it. The money's not going to get us out of it. It's going to take
Right?
leadership to get us out of it.
Yeah.
It's going to take less parochial thinking and worrying about
Right.
my whatever, my team, my conference. The problem, I think, it's hard to convince, as Pete calls them, some of the sweater vests and other people making these decisions. They're not
Uh-huh.
fans.
Right.
They're looking at revenue. They're looking at viewership. That's what they base everything on. And I think NASCAR is a good cautionary tale. They went down this same pathway, I think it's coming out of it now. But they've gone
Mhm.
through a pretty tough lull, and it's still not back to where it was viewership wise. Now they're building a new audience. They got Michael Jordan involved. That's pretty cool. But they gave up on their fans in Rockingham and some of these other ones to build another track or another race in Chicago and California where they didn't really care as much because that's what they thought the TV market wanted.
Right.
And
Right.
I worry that if you only focus on TV revenue and what it looks like today without really, because it doesn't feel like anybody, the sweater vest types and the quote leaders, the theys of college football, it doesn't feel like they're looking much past 2026. It looks
Mhm.
like they're holding on for this ride, trying to figure out how to win this year. It doesn't feel like, and again, I think that's where Goodell and the NFL, they are looking longer term. They've got a visionary leader. You don't have a
Right.
visionary leader that's looking out for the whole in college football. And when you don't have that and everybody's kind of rowing in different directions, it can go off the rails pretty quickly.
Right. No, you're
And what
absolutely
got us
right.
into this is not going to get us out of it, and a bunch of parochial thinking, maximize my revenue for my conference. We want to be the dominant conference. And the fans are part of the problem too, because that whole debate of our conference is better or not. Well, what you don't hear in the NFL, oh, the AFC is better than NFC. People aren't at bars fighting over that, or the AFC
Right.
West is better than NFC. Nobody cares. It
Right.
does. You don't even. It's hard to even remember who's in what conferences sometimes. So
Yeah, and we can thank Joe Namath and the New York Jets for dispelling that myth early on that the
yeah,
NFL was better than the AFL.
yep,
Thank God that happened. But
yeah.
no, you're right.
And it
And
ebbs
so
and
we
flows too. I mean, the AFC
right,
sometimes, if you look back over the last 15 Super Bowls, the NFC had a run for a while, then the AFC's had a
right.
run, and it goes back and forth. But that's because you do have a visionary, who is looking out over the whole thing, and they're not just looking at their own interest trying to build. Because right now, Greg Sankey's goal and Greg Petiti or Tony Petiti's goals are the same to make their conference the best, whatever that means. We don't even know what that
Mhm.
means, but that's all they're looking at. They don't care about the other one. It's not part of
Yeah,
their job.
and if they were able to pull that off for the next 10 years, they would kill the sport because
100%.
nobody else would care.
It's
We'd all
Clemson
start
and
playing
Bama
club sports.
when Clemson and Bama played for every national championship other than those 2 fan bases and hardcore fans, the sport didn't get better.
Right.
Indiana winning
No,
last year is probably one of the best things overall that you could have. You got a whole 'nother fan base that's energized and excited and engaged, but that's not what the goal of, even Petiti probably doesn't care about that as much. He's happy that the Big Ten won another championship.
well,
Good
again,
discussion.
and the good thing is I think we care about the fans
Yeah.
because if you don't have them, you can forget the rest of it.
And I think
And
we
yes,
both agree it
you can
can't
still
continue how it is. There's gotta
no,
be
it
some
cannot.
change. There's
It
gotta be
certainly
some
cannot.
structure, and just spending more money with no guardrails. Again, that's
Mhm.
the no contracts, no guardrails, no rules. Again, it goes back to the initial thing we said. We've got professional money involved. Ironically, I think it's hilarious that they're both about 12 billion between the NFL and college. And one's got a lot of structure and rules and ironically has good success, and the other one has none of that. And it doesn't feel like it's headed toward more success.
Yeah, that's I've heard Joel Klatt say, and I appreciate him saying that he thought that college football that we were in the golden age of college football. I'm not sure he would say that today. He
Right.
might,
He's
but
changed
it's
the beginning of
certainly
his podcast now.
yeah, it is not trending in that direction now. It can, and it can go further. It can go further, but we
But if you
just
just
gotta get
allow
somewhere.
some teams, if you allow 6 teams to spend 40 to $50 million on their roster,
Right,
it's back to what you said in the very beginning. You're gonna have 6 teams that are elite every year, and then you're gonna have a bunch that aren't even competitive, and it won't be fun to
right,
watch. That's
right,
what it's gonna look like. And again, we
and so
can we can debate about how many we want to be in the group that's got parity or not. But I think trying to do something to where there's just because think about how quick it's escalated. Last year, there was rumor
yes.
that it was maybe Texas Tech, and Texas had two $40 million rosters.
Mhm.
Now, what I heard the other day, and this was from a SEC staffer, they won't ever identify who they are, but some staff member of an SEC team, coaching staff for an SEC team, said right now the baseline to compete to get to the playoffs is a $40 million roster. So it went from two maybe rumored teams to that's the baseline of where you've got to be.
Right. Well, think of it in another sense, and we can begin to cut this off, but think about what it costs, the numbers we've heard, to get elected to the Senate or the House or to the presidency. And it has squeezed out so many perhaps viable candidates.
Yep.
And it's no wonder that the voting populace really, quite honestly, doesn't care.
Yep.
So they go with sound bites and, who their favorite cousin thinks is best, and nobody really cares anymore because it has become a super elite funded by the super rich that have any chance, on the national anyway, or even the state political, landscape. we run the risk if we're not careful. We're not there yet, but we run the risk of running into that. And
I
this
think
is
that's a
from
good
somebody
point.
who loves Texas Tech and knows that Cody Campbell will spend for a while.
No,
Anyway,
it's a great point. My dad got to where he hated professional sports because he thought they were all whiny, spoiled rich people, and he liked college sports more. He would watch college athletics. He would not watch NFL, NBA, any of it. And I think we've talked about it on a previous episode, but you don't have a ton of crossover with fans of the NFL and college football. A lot of
right,
them are fans of one or the other. And I bet
right,
if you went and looked at it, a lot of people, it's because it is amateur athletics, it's college athletics, it's all this stuff versus the spoiled rich athlete who can't relate. Well, guess what we're creating 4 years
yeah,
sooner now? A bunch of
that's right.
spoiled rich athletes who can't relate. And I do think, to your point, you put out a good number of candidates because if it is just a money raise, you're going to limit who can do that. But at
True.
some point, it becomes a big turnoff to the fans when you've got 19-year-old kids complaining and they're making $3 million a year.
Well, maybe there'll be enough discussions like ours around the country that will finally get somebody's ear and maybe get some momentum going.
Would
I
love to
still like
see
the
it.
idea maybe next week we turn our attention to something completely different, and
I
that
agree.
is the uh, the state of education
Love it.
across the board in this country, and that can open up multiple podcasts, but that's okay. But
I think
in the
that's
interim, this
important.
has been good. I have enjoyed this, and who knows? Maybe some of our ideas will ultimately get implemented before we die.
We'll claim them if they do. We'll say that
There
it
you
started
go. There
it
you go.
started here on episode 7. If they take any of these ideas, we're gonna claim them. So
That's
I
right.
like it.
That's right.
All
Well,
right.
listen, it's
Good
been
stuff.
great, man. Have a
Yes,
great
sir.
weekend, and talk to you next week.
Yes, sir. You as well.